Where is America's moral compass? How is America doing on the morality front? That's the discussion of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And I just want to give a heads up to Edify, EDIFI, the platform that is now hosting my Bold and Blunt podcast. You can go to Edify online, download the app to your phone, and you can access Bold and Blunt along with all the other faith-based podcasts that this great platform has to offer. If you're looking for a little bit of light among the darkness, go to Edify. Check out the podcasts. So, the moral compass of America. Where do we stand? My guest today, the former Secretary of State under the great President Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, is my guest today, and he's going to discuss with me. But before I get to that, a quick word from this show's sponsor for today, First Liberty Institute.
One of the most radical plans to reshape the future of America is happening right now, and we need to stop it. President Biden's plan to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. Thankfully, First Liberty Institute has written a letter asking the commission to reject this radical court-packing scheme. Join leaders like Franklin Graham, former Attorney General Ed Meese, plus over 150,000 other patriots who've signed this letter. Go to SupremeCoop, that's COUP.com, to sign First Liberty's letter today. That's SupremeCoop.com. God bless America.
God bless America indeed. God bless America's citizens. All right, welcome back. The Global God Divide. That is a headline from a Pew Research poll conducted or published in July 2020. And the headline goes on to read, people's thoughts on whether belief in God is necessary to be moral vary by economic development, education, and age. And some of the findings from this poll, let me go ahead and read right from it. Across the 34 countries, which span 6 continents, a median of 45% say it is necessary to believe in God to be moral and have good values. But there are large regional variations in answers to this question. People in the emerging economies included in this survey tend to be more religious and more likely to consider religion to be important in their lives. And they are also more likely than people in this survey who live in advanced economies to say that belief in God is necessary to be moral. That's not just interesting, that's a little bit common sense. It's when people struggle most that they turn to a higher power. It's when people, out of desperation, seek someone to come in and save them that they often turn to a higher power. But when people's needs are filled, when people feel happy, content, they have enough food on the table, everything's going great in their lives, especially if they're wealthy, especially if they have cars in their driveways, especially if they have pricey vacations that are easily paid for, especially if they have housing that's on the luxurious side. People in those situations tend to forget God. That's just human nature. When things are going well, we think, well, God is favoring me. I don't need him. I got this. On a day-to-day, we're less prone to feel the urge, the internal drive to turn to God, to seek his will, to seek his guidance, because we think, I'm good, I got this. But watch when a hurricane hits. Watch when a tornado hits. Watch when a wildfire hits. And everything that you worked so hard for your whole life, that God blessed you with, that luxurious home, is gone in a flash. Watch people then turn to God. So it's natural, it's common sense, it's probably even human nature that as things go well in life, we automatically drift from the day-to-day contact that we may have with God when we're in more perilous times, when we're facing more dangerous times. After all, that old saying, there are no atheists in foxholes, in wartime, didn't come from thin air. It came because it was based on reality. You may enter the military as an atheist, as a non-believer, but boy, when those bullets are flying over your head and the enemy's advancing, suddenly you're praying to something that just a few months earlier you may not even have believed in. Back to this Pew poll. Let me read a little bit more. Not only do differences occur between countries and continents, but the poll also goes on to say that differences occur within countries as well. In general, people who are relatively non-religious are more inclined than highly religious people in the same countries to say it is not necessary to believe in God to be a moral person. Okay, so how does that play out in America? Well, Pew breaks it down. In the United States, 54%, remember this is July 2020, 54% say it is not necessary to believe in God to be a moral person. 44% say it is necessary. For comparison purposes, in Canada, 73% say it is not necessary to believe in God to be moral, versus 26% who do. That's interesting because Canada was founded on spiritual principles. Canada was founded on Christian principles. The preamble to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms actually reads, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. And now 3/4 of the nation say that we don't need God to be moral. Just a sidestep for a quick second. Promise Keepers reports, Promise Keepers wrote, 150 years ago, Canada was a Christian nation. On July 1st, 1867, the newest country in the world rejoiced in the title Dominion and took as its motto, from sea to sea, terms that are plucked from Psalm 72, right from the Bible, the Judeo-Christian Bible. The Christian Bible, Psalm 72. Religion infused politics, culture, and everyday life. It guided one's vote, one's choice of spouse and place of education. To be a respectable citizen, one had to be a churchgoer. That's Canada 150 years ago. Does it sound like any country you know? Say, America? That's about America. That's how America was. And now, in America, we get headlines like this from Gallup, March 2021. U.S. church membership falls below majority for first time. April 2019, another Gallup finding. U.S. church membership down sharply in past 2 decades. And Statista in January of 2021, according to a 2020 survey, 29% of Americans never attend church or synagogue, compared to 24% of Americans who attend every week. So what does it all matter? What difference does it make? Well, when you have a nation of people who don't go to church, who don't think that their moral compass has to come from God, who don't read the Bible, who don't see any need to take daily direction and guidance from a heavenly creator, you get things like this. May 6, 2021, this headline. About 6 in 10 Americans say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. You get findings like this. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 19.7 million American adults aged 12 and older, battled a substance use disorder in 2017. About 38% of adults in 2017 battled an illicit drug use disorder. And that same year, 2017, 1 out of every 8 adults struggled with both alcohol and drug use disorders simultaneously. Age 12 and older. Are you kidding me? You get findings like this from the National Fatherhood Initiative. There is a father absence crisis in America. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 18.3 million children, 1 in 4, live without a biological step or adoptive father in the home. Consequently, there is a father factor in nearly all social ills facing America today. Let me read that last line again. There is a father factor in nearly all social ills facing America today. What social ills, you may ask? Okay. How about the prison rates? How about drug and alcohol addictions? How about behavioral problems of youth in schools? You know, there is a 4 times greater risk of poverty among those who are raised in homes without fathers. There is a greater likelihood of youth headed to prison who are raised in homes without fathers. Those raised in homes without fathers are twice as likely to drop out of high school, more likely to commit crimes, which of course feeds into the more likely to go to prison statistic. Look, it's common sense. When you have broken homes, you have broken children. And then you have these children who come from broken homes being raised with the idea that brokenness is normal. And guess what? They become the leaders of America. They become the next generation of American leaders, American voters at the very least. America knows something's wrong. America feels something's wrong here. Pew Research, March 2019, writes in a headline, "Looking to the future, public sees an America in decline on many fronts. Majorities predict a weaker economy, a growing income divide, a degraded environment, and a broken political system." Okay, so we know something is wrong. The poll breaks it down this way. 60% of Americans in this 2019 poll say that America will be seen as declining in stature on the world stage. 73% believe there will be a gap between rich and poor that will grow wider. And 65% believe that the country will be more politically divided. Well, that one's bearing out true for sure. But look, where do these things come from? They don't spring up from nowhere. Here's where they come from. The moral compass of the people. The politics, the political world isn't a bubble where it operates absent human nature. So if you fill your political world with humans who are not properly morally compassed, then this is the rot you get. You get animosity, you get division, you get growing gaps between haves and have-nots. You get broken homes, fatherless homes, where children are led astray by the streets. You get filled prison systems. You get drug addicts, alcohol addicts. You get behavioral issues and violence and crime. And you get the next generation being raised that this is the norm, that this is normalcy, that this is life. Who's teaching about being created in the image of God? In a broken society, nobody. So for those in America who say, for those 54% in America who say that belief in God is not necessary in order to be moral, I ask you, are you sure about that? Because look where America stands right now. Look around and look at the darkness that's permeated America. Look around and look at the darkness that's coming into America, into our culture, feeding our political system. Taking morals from self ain't working so well. It's time for something new. As a matter of fact, it's time for something old. Because founding fathers based the limited governance aspects of this nation on the fact that it required a moral and virtuous citizenry, because they knew only moral and virtuous citizens could self-govern. A moral citizenry compassed from above is capable of self-governing. An immoral citizenry requires bigger, biggest government to come in and regulate and govern. People who obey the law because they're afraid of God, or because they respect God, or because they believe in God, they don't need laws telling them how to behave. It's only the criminal element, the thuggish element, the immoral element, who need laws to dictate behavior and then to punish when they deviate. The more moral the country is, the less government is needed. That is very much why Democrats in this country and communists in other countries want to boot God, want to downgrade God, want to stick God as far away from governance as possible, because God gets in the way of their power grabs. So look around America right now and ask yourself, what does America most need to keep free going forward? If the answer is anything but a return to God, a national reawakening of our Judeo-Christian principles, if the answer is anything but that, then you're missing the larger point. You're missing the big takeaway. You're missing the big solution. Yes, politics are important. Yes, the economy is important. Yes, education, the educational system, important. All these things are important. And we have to be involved. We have to be on guard against the far leftist forces that are trying to cripple our country from within using these various systems. But remember, these systems are only as strong as the people who fill the shoes of leadership of these systems. And if we have morally bankrupt people filling the roles of leadership in these systems, then the systems will indeed crumble. It's a return to church. It's a return to faith. It's a return to taking morals from above. If you look at the statistics, if you look around America with truthful eyes, you have to acknowledge our own hearts and minds are wickedly deceptive and leading us down a path of moral decay, which is feeding into all the other decays in our systems that we're seeing right now at this point in American history. And my guest today, the former Secretary of State under Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, is going to discuss this with me. But first, a quick break to hear from our sponsor, First Liberty Institute.
One of the most radical plans to reshape the future of America is happening right now, and we need to stop it. President Biden's plan to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. Learn more at SupremeCoop. That's COUP.com. That's SupremeCoop.com. God bless America.
Welcome back. Once again, God bless America indeed, and America's peoples. And now, Mike Pompeo, without further ado, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you, Cheryl. Thanks for having me on the show.
So I wanted to speak with you about basically the state of the nation, looking at it from a political and spiritual angle. And I just wanted to start the discussion by getting a foundation from you. How close are we to falling like Rome?
Oh, goodness. You know, one never knows the moment, but one always fears the direction. And as I watch our leaders walk away from Americans' capacity to be a force for good in the world. I watch people back home begin to refuse to underwrite the most fundamental ideas of our founding right, the idea that we should protect property rights and people. They want to defund the police, that they want to talk about racial oppression in our classroom, not the history of America, but the fact that we should divide by race and not treat every human being as created in the image of God. When I see that trend, when I see more and more people headed what looks to me more like the secular left in Europe, I do worry about the Republic. Our educational institutions are failing the next generation of students. We have to reclaim America. We have to reclaim American history and American freedom. I am excited because I've been out these past months meeting with people all across the country in my role trying to help candidates get elected in November of 22, and I've watched the energy and I've seen people begin to understand and recognize this risk. and begin to respond just as great patriots for the last 245 years have always responded.
So when you see people or when you hear people talk about America was founded on secular principles and God is great for Sundays in the church, in the pews, but it doesn't belong in the political world, how do you respond to that?
Well, it's both untrue and inconsistent with our history. Faith was a central component of the understanding that our founders brought to this country. And two central notions. One is that God created the rights that each of us had, and government did not create them. Indeed, is designed only to provide the tools to protect those rights that God gave each of us. And second, they had this idea of religious freedom, the unambiguous, unadulterated right of every American to practice their faith in the way that they choose. I must say, Cheryl, as I watched this pandemic and I watched bars open and churches closed by government fiat, it suggested to me that all the work that I've done these last 4 years around the world protecting religious freedom and building out religious freedom around the world was something that we have to protect and preserve right here at home. So, yes, I've heard people talk about this separation between church and state. This is a fiction. We very much need faithful leaders, not of any particular faith, but people who are disciplined in their faith and their understanding of our Judeo-Christian heritage here in the United States. We need those people to demand that their elected officials at every level, from city council to president of the United States, that every one of their elected officials protect and preserve those most fundamental rights.
I like how you say that. I like how you use the word demand, because I think that the dire shape of our nation right now requires people start becoming more demanding about just that point. And a few months ago, I heard you speak at the National Religious Broadcasters Conference, and you spoke about how when you were traveling overseas and you had a speech prepared, there was a certain portion of it that your staff wanted to take out, and yet you insisted on putting it back in. Could you explain to listeners, if you recall, what
yes, I know the.
It was great.
Yeah, I know the story. So I was headed to Cairo, Egypt, to make a speech about American policy in the Middle East. And if you'll recall, President Obama had gone there to Cairo and apologized on behalf of the United States of America. I wanted to go back and remind them of how we have been a force for good all around the world for so long, and not that there's no need to apologize for America's actions. I decided to start the speech. I wrote the first pieces of it in outline, and I included at the very beginning a simple statement to open the speech, which was, I'm Mike Pompeo, and I'm an evangelical Christian. And the team took it out, and it came back to them, and I wrote back in, and finally they came up, and it was important to me. And I ultimately delivered the speech with that line at its very beginning. It was important. It was important to me because I wanted them to know with whom they were speaking.
Right.
It's important that we understand who our counterparts are. And I must say, to this day, I get comments from people all the time sending letters or notes, or when they run into me someplace. I have that moment probably more than any other brought to my attention. People of every faith, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all said, Mike, we appreciated that. You were fearless in talking about the things you believed and why you believed in them. You were personally committed and disciplined in your faith in the same way that we are in ours. And they appreciated that kind of candor. It let us have more serious, more real, more fundamental conversations about how we would work as partners to reduce the risk of terror, to reduce poverty and create prosperity. All the things that those leaders were looking for depended on Americans who were committed to being disciplined and active in their understanding of faith and our Creator's role in the world.
Let's talk a second about what you just said about fearless in your faith. To what extent do you think it's the Christian world's fault, the Christian community's fault in America right now for being too quiet and allowing secularism to creep into first our culture and then our politics? Are Christians getting it wrong, that principle in the Bible that says live in this world but not of this world?
As a more secular, I will always remind people, I'll hear folks say, hey, Mike, I don't do that politics thing. I remind them that politics is going to do them. and that's a shorthand and kind of jocular way to get at your larger point. Those who believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ know that they have a responsibility to him first and foremost. But they also have a responsibility in the civic component of their life to bring their understandings about how human beings should treat each other, how nations should interact, how we must respect every human life. We have a responsibility to not only practice those on Sunday mornings and talk about them with our Christian friends, but to, with all the kindness and love and graciousness that we can possibly muster, make clear that our expectation that our country, the United States of America, will protect those rights and those central understandings. I pray that our church leaders will come to appreciate this as well. I saw some incredible bravery during COVID-19 where governments were telling parishioners they couldn't come to churches, and I saw some amazing leaders, Christian leaders, rise up and say, nope, we're going to find a way to do this. We're going to do it safely, but we're going to find a way to do this. Those are the kinds of things, those are the acts of Christian love that are demanded of each of us.
You know, that speaking of the churches and the church closings during the pandemic, that is one of the things I think that was really underestimated by conservatives as being a sad and sorry show of how far our nation has turned the corner. But it kind of leads into my point right now that I want to make about Afghanistan. America has really showed itself fallen on the moral standing, don't you think, with Afghanistan right now?
It's a complicated problem set, for sure. But I must say, as leaders around the world are watching the way America has conducted the exit from Afghanistan, I think they are deeply disappointed in our commitment to the things that we had built over these last 20 years. A central set of understandings about the way the bad guys would be permitted to behave. They're now running free and wild, and this will put American lives and our allies and friends' lives at risk as well. It now appears that we're going to depart Afghanistan, likely leaving numbers of Americans behind. This is not something that is in the American tradition, and your point's well taken. Others will observe this, and they'll see that this is American decay. It's the absence of American leadership, and it presents real risk. The bad guys around the world will see this and take note of it and respond in ways that harm and put Americans at risk.
You know, it's heartbreaking to think of the people we're leaving there in Afghanistan, people we promised that we wouldn't abandon. That just goes to the moral compass of this administration, in my view.
Cheryl, I always think about our administration and the things we tried to focus on every day. And while we didn't always get everything right, we were deeply focused on making sure that we were delivering the things that the American people asked us to. President Trump would always talk about, hey, Mike, these are the 5 things I told the American people we would accomplish. And we tried to do this always with a compass that was grounded in American history and America's finest traditions. And I watched this administration focused on things like climate change and critical race theory and the 1619 Project, instead of providing the basic protection of the rights that every American must have.
So someone listening right now might be curious, how do you bring your faith into modern living? How do you get it out of the Sunday worship and bring it into the actual day-to-day? And I think that's something that you've actually shown pretty well. How do you do it? How do you, pragmatically speaking, bring your faith into your day-to-day living?
Oh, sure. You know, I don't always get it right either.
No, nobody does.
But it is an important part of who I am, and I think anybody who's interacted with me in a significant way would appreciate the fact that I always go back to these central ideas. I can't possibly leave this behind me in my role as a government official. I couldn't possibly just separate that out. I would get asked, how do you separate these two? And the question itself was confounding to me. These are the things that I believe, not just on Sunday morning, but for all of my life. And so I tried to take those ideas, those central principles. I also, you have to maintain some discipline, so I had a Bible in my office. I would do my best to read it every morning. My wife and I prayed. We appreciated the fact that folks were praying for us as well. We would openly tell people that. We worked on religious freedom with people of every faith all across the world. You take these moments where you have this civic authority, this capacity that this nation gave you, and you try to deliver these outcomes that are clear about who you are and the things that matter most in this world.
How do you use your faith to counter deceptions? Things that just get you outraged when you watch them on the political scene day after day after day, and you know that they're lies and deceptions. How do you use your faith to overcome that evil and to keep motivated and inspired and optimistic to continue on?
Those are two things. One, I am prayerful, as my wife Susan. We will pray for all of the people that are engaged in a particular thing we're watching unfold. We certainly pray for our current leadership, President Biden and Vice President Harris. We want them to see the light and to execute right on behalf of the United States of America. But second, Cheryl, too, Susan and I are always mindful that the Lord, no matter as we watch this world and we watch America, the Lord is watching over this. He knows that this is a critical time, and he is watching each of us, and he is measuring our actions. And he is a good Lord and a gracious Lord. And if we will listen to him and surrender ourselves to him, then we will more often than not be likely to get it right.
Do you think this country will turn back from its secular ways and start listening to God? When you see the churches that teach things that are actually against the Bible, and they pat themselves on the back as if they're doing God's work, how do you come back from that as a nation?
We've always done it, Cheryl. Each time that America has been confronted with a deep challenge, from its founding to the wars that were fought in the late 1700s, to our Civil War, to the massive conflict that took place, the civil society in the 1960s, each time America has turned its gaze to the right place and has come away from these stronger and more capable and more closely connected to its traditional foundings in Judeo-Christian heritage. I pray that America will do that again. I'm hearing it every place I go, I must say. I was at church in Southern California a few weeks back. People were on fire not only for the Lord, but they were saying, Mike, I haven't been to a PTA meeting in a long time. I'm going. Mike, I never run for a school board before. I'm thinking about doing that. Again, taking their beliefs and moving them into the space of civic action to deliver on this country's finest traditions. I believe deeply that this nation is resilient and that we will identify the direction our country is heading, and we'll begin to reclaim those central understandings that are so vital to the next 245 years of America.
Well, that's great. And that's a great way to end this on a very optimistic note. So, former Secretary, of course, but out of respect, Secretary Mike Pompeo, I really want to thank you for your time and your words of inspiration. Thank you.
Cheryl, bless you. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. You have a wonderful day.
You too. Today's big takeaway: don't let the atheists tell you that this country is supposed to be atheist. Don't let the atheists and the secularists and the communists and the globalists cripple America from within by removing all things God, all things godly from the public square. Our fate, our freedoms depend on the ability of keeping God at the forefront so as to keep government in its rightful position of service to the people. Thank you for listening. A quick shout out to Edify, Edifi. Go to Edify online, download the Edify app to your smartphone, and get your daily dose of faith-based podcast to help you stay motivated and inspired for the fight against the far left. And also, don't forget, you can always check out Bold and Blunt on the pages of the Washington Times. Go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl to subscribe for a discounted edition of the Washington Times digital platform. You will get, for 50% off, a full year's access to all the Washington Times has to offer on its digital platform. That's news, that's commentaries, that's great podcasts like Bold and Blunt. And if you'd also like to get bold and blunt along with my daily commentaries delivered straight to your email box, go to WashingtonTimes.com, find my name, Cheryl Chumley, click on the hyperlink, and at the bottom of one of my commentaries are easy directions on how to sign up to get my 3 times a week newsletter emailed directly to you, so you will never ever miss my commentaries and Bold and Blunt podcasts that come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Thank you so much, Bold and Blunt listeners. Appreciate your listening. Tune in next time, and as always, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.